The night before her murder, Jessica Monroe was exactly where she wanted to be, standing in front of a hotel mirror, fixing the strap of her black dress, counting the cash in her hand. $800. Easy money for a few hours of conversation, a few drinks, a man's temporary fantasy. The bills were crisp, stacked neatly, a reminder of why she did this. She tucked them into her purse and took one last look at herself. Dark waves of hair cascading over one shoulder, red lipstick carefully applied, a faint smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She was 26, young, confident, in control. She knew how to read people, how to play the game. Men weren't complicated, at least, not in her line of work. They all wanted something, and she knew exactly how to give them just enough without losing herself. At 10:42 p.m., she stepped into the lobby of the Grand Regent Hotel, a place she had been to before. The lighting was low, warm, designed to make everyone look better than they did under harsh daylight. The air smelled of expensive cologne and aged whiskey. A pianist played something soft in the background, a melody that barely cut through the low murmur of conversations. A man was waiting for her near the elevators. Well-dressed. A tailored navy suit, an expensive watch glinting under the chandelier's glow. He was taller than she expected, well-groomed, and exuded the quiet confidence of someone who was used to getting his way. She had met all kinds, nervous men, arrogant ones, the ones who wanted to talk, and the ones who just wanted her to listen. This one was different. He smiled at her, a slow, deliberate curve of the lips, and extended his hand. She hesitated, just for a second, before slipping her fingers into his. His grip was firm, steady. Not too tight, not too eager. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The elevator doors slid open, and he led her inside. At 10:44 p.m., the doors closed. Security footage captured that moment, the last time Jessica Monroe was seen alive. No hesitation. No sign of discomfort. She wasn't looking over her shoulder. She wasn't trying to escape. There was no struggle, no whispered plea for help. Just the quiet hum of the elevator as it ascended, carrying her toward a room where the night would take a turn no one could have predicted. Hours later, long after the lights in the hotel dimmed, long after the last guests had retreated to their rooms, a woman's scream echoed through the empty hallways. It was brief. Muffled. A sound that could have easily been mistaken for something else. No one called for help. No one knocked on the door. By morning, Jessica Monroe was gone. And by the time the first rays of sunlight touched the city skyline, a jogger near the waterfront would stumble upon something no one should ever have to see, half of a woman's body, washed up on the shore. Jessica Monroe was 26 years old. She had grown up in a small town just outside of Tampa, Florida, the youngest of 3 siblings. Her mother, a nurse, worked long hours to provide for the family after Jessica's father left when she was just 10 years old. By the time she was 16, Jessica had already learned how to take care of herself. She was smart, independent, and knew how to get what she wanted. She had dreams once. Dreams of becoming a makeup artist, of moving to Los Angeles, of building a life far from where she started. But dreams were expensive, and reality had other plans. At 18, she was working late nights as a waitress. By 20, she had tried college, struggled to keep up with the tuition, and dropped out after 1 semester. The bills kept coming. The jobs didn't pay enough. That was when she was introduced to the world of high-end escorting. It wasn't what people thought. It wasn't standing on street corners or dealing with shady men in dark alleys. This was different. Private clients. Upscale hotels. Money that made life easier, that made the struggle disappear, at least for a little while. Jessica was good at what she did. She set her own rules. No drugs. No dangerous clients. No getting emotionally involved. It was a business, a transaction. And for the most part, it worked. Until March 11, 2023. The night she walked into the Grand Regent Hotel and never walked out. The hotel was one of the finest in the city, a place where businessmen, politicians, and celebrities checked in without wanting their names attached to a paper trail. Discretion was everything. No one asked questions. No one pried. At 10:42 p.m., Jessica entered the lobby. Security footage showed her approaching the man who had booked her for the night. He was later identified as Daniel Pierce, a 38-year-old financial consultant from New York. No criminal record. No history of violence. A man who, by all accounts, lived a quiet and successful life. He greeted her with a handshake. They exchanged a few words. Then they stepped into the elevator together. The camera captured one final image of them before the doors slid shut. Jessica, standing beside him, her face calm, unaware that she had just taken her last steps into the world. Sometime between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., something went terribly wrong. No one heard a struggle. No one saw her leave. At 6:15 a.m., a jogger was making his usual run along the riverfront. The early morning air was crisp, the city just beginning to stir awake. He was used to seeing strange things, discarded clothing, the occasional abandoned bag, even a wallet left behind by a drunken tourist. But nothing could have prepared him for what he found that morning. Near the edge of the water, tangled in debris, half of a human torso lay motionless on the shore. At first, he thought it was a mannequin, something thrown into the river as a cruel joke. But as he got closer, reality set in. The skin was real. The blood was real. The horror was real. He stumbled backward, his breath catching in his throat. His hands shook as he fumbled for his phone, dialing 911. The dispatcher's voice was calm, routine. 911, what's your emergency? There was silence at first. Then, in a voice that barely sounded like his own, he managed to say the words. I found a body. Within minutes, the riverfront was swarmed with flashing lights. Police. Crime scene investigators. Reporters trying to push past the barricades. Detectives examined the remains carefully, noting the clean precision of the cut. Whoever had done this knew what they were doing. This wasn't a sloppy, impulsive crime. It was planned. Methodical. There was no sign of the rest of the body. No head. No arms. No legs. Just a torso, washed up like a discarded piece of evidence. The autopsy would later confirm what investigators already suspected. The woman had been cut in half with surgical precision. And that was just the beginning. The crime scene was chaotic. Officers marked off the area with bright yellow tape as forensic experts moved carefully around the remains. The body had been in the water for hours, maybe longer, but something about it stood out immediately, the precision. Whoever had done this hadn't hacked or torn at the body in a fit of rage. They had separated it cleanly, methodically, with the kind of skill that suggested either medical knowledge or experience with dismemberment. As the sun climbed higher over the city, investigators worked against time, knowing that the first 48 hours were critical. The body had no ID, no clothing, nothing to immediately connect it to a missing persons report. But then, one detective noticed something. A small, barely visible mark on the lower abdomen, the outline of a tattoo. It was faded from time in the water, but it was still there. A tiny script, just below the ribs. They took a picture and ran it through their system, comparing it against known missing persons. Hours passed. The city moved on with its day. Commuters rushed to work. Parents took their kids to school. Life didn't stop for crime. And then, a match. The tattoo, a single word, forever, belonged to Jessica Monroe. Detectives moved quickly. They contacted her family, her friends, the people who had seen her last. Some were hesitant to talk, reluctant to admit they knew what Jessica did for a living. Others were more forthcoming, confirming what investigators had already begun to suspect: Jessica was last seen entering the Grand Regent Hotel. By 5 p.m. that evening, detectives arrived at the hotel with a warrant for security footage. They combed through hours of video, watching as Jessica stepped inside, flawless and composed, and made her way across the lobby. Then they saw him. Daniel Pierce. There was no mistaking him, the man in the navy suit, the expensive watch, the quiet confidence. He had approached Jessica like a man who had done this before. No hesitation. No second-guessing. The footage showed them stepping into the elevator together at 10:44 p.m. And then, nothing. No footage of Jessica leaving. No record of her checking out. No signs of struggle in the hallways. Yet by morning, she was gone. Detectives moved fast, tracking down Daniel Pierce's information. His room had been checked out by 6 a.m., just 9 minutes before the jogger found Jessica's remains. A closer look at the hotel records revealed something else: Daniel hadn't just booked a single night. He had reserved the room for an entire week. So why did he leave early? Investigators knew they were running out of time. The body had been found, but where was the rest? And if Jessica had been killed inside that hotel, how had he managed to move her without anyone noticing? They checked the service entrances, the dumpsters, the underground parking. And then, they found it. A single, dark red smear on the bottom of a room service cart. Barely noticeable. Almost invisible to the untrained eye. But under the right light, it was undeniable. Blood. Jessica had left that hotel. Just not in the way anyone expected. 5. Resolution and aftermath. The moment Jessica Monroe's remains were discovered inside that storage unit, everything changed. What had started as a missing person case was now a homicide investigation with undeniable proof. Authorities issued a nationwide manhunt for Daniel Pierce. His apartment was abandoned, his bank accounts untouched. It was as if he had vanished, but men like him don't just disappear. The FBI was brought in, tracking every lead, every phone call, every known associate. But Daniel had planned for this. He had no family to lean on, no close friends, no trail of breadcrumbs leading straight to him. Until one mistake. A rental car, picked up under an alias, was found abandoned near a private airstrip in Tijuana, Mexico. Security footage showed him stepping out of the vehicle, wearing sunglasses, a hat pulled low over his face. But it was him. Daniel Pierce was running. But what he didn't realize was that he wasn't fast enough. Mexican authorities worked with U.S. Marshals, and within 72 hours, they tracked him to a luxury villa outside Cancun. He had paid in cash, using a fake ID, living in secrecy, but he was still breathing free air. Not for long. On a warm summer morning, armed agents stormed the villa. Daniel was caught off guard, half-dressed, a drink still sitting on the glass table beside him. There was no dramatic struggle, no last attempt at escape. Just the cold realization that it was over. They extradited him back to New York, where he was immediately charged with first-degree murder, unlawful dismemberment, and evidence tampering. In the courtroom, Jessica Monroe's family sat in silence as prosecutors laid out the chilling details of what happened that night. The $800 arrangement. The hotel meeting. The early morning disappearance. The body in the storage unit. The jury took less than 4 hours to deliberate. And when they returned, the verdict was read, guilty on all counts. The judge wasted no time. Given the brutality of the crime, the pain inflicted on the victim, and the lack of remorse from the defendant, Daniel Pierce was sentenced to death. Jessica's family cried. Some in relief, some in grief, knowing that justice had been served but also knowing it would never bring her back. As for Daniel Pierce, he was transferred to death row, where he now sits, waiting for the day when he will face the same fate he forced upon his victim. And yet, the question still lingers, was Jessica Monroe his only victim? Because sometimes, when the truth is finally uncovered, it reveals something far more terrifying. That it wasn't the first time. And that, somewhere out there, another life had already been taken, and never found. As we conclude this harrowing journey into the tragic story of Jessica Monroe and the chilling actions of Daniel Pierce, we invite you to reflect and engage with us. Share your thoughts. What are your theories about Daniel Pierce's past? Do you believe there may be other victims? Share your insights and join the conversation in the comments below. Stay connected. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more in-depth explorations of true crime cases. Spread awareness. Consider sharing this video with others to shed light on the complexities of such cases and the importance of justice for victims like Jessica.